ChoralEd. Welcome to episode 7 of ChoralEd. I'm your host, Micah Bland. Thanks so much for watching. Today, as we continue our series on choral tone, it is my great pleasure to welcome one of my professors from the University of Southern California, Dr. Joe Michael Scheibe. Dr. Scheibe, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
So to begin, can you describe for us your ideal choral tone?
That's a hard question to answer, but let's see if we can do some parameters of what I think is my ideal sound. And I do think that there are many different sounds that are ideal, and it's always perhaps subject to the conductor's ideal sound. So it's a great question. First of all, I'd say breath. I think there always has to be breath engagement in the choral tone so that the resonators are set up, the body is relaxed, the singing is free, non-restricted. It has to be in tune. I think that intonation is a great indicator of everything being aligned and being free, and that the resonators are set up correctly. And so I think that would be kind of an overall parameter. So do we have the right breath? Do we have the right support mechanism? And I hate using that term support. I keep thinking of support being a negative term, that it probably has a connotation of pressure, and I don't think that's more of a balance of the musculature. I do want freedom in the body as well, so that everything is free and loose, and that we have that choral sound that grabs people.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned the right breath, and I know you talk about on the breath. Can you expand more on your approach to breathing in your tone?
I think that number one, you really need to understand how vowels can affect by pitch, where they might need to be modified. So it's always about setting the breath into motion so that the resonators are set in the right way for maximum amplitude and beauty. So for me, it's always interesting to see that when we're in the process of building a choral sound, that probably the last thing we really spend time on is onset and breath. And yet those are the two things that I think really affect the sound that we're going to produce. So if I'm going to start that, I think that there's some exercises obviously that we can do, things about deep breathing. We can ask them to put their sit down, put their elbows on their knees, to breathe deep, to feel that breath which is lower in the body. We can watch physically what's happening with the rib cage. Is the rib cage rising and falling? If so, what are we doing to correct that? A monitor might be to take your hand, place it up here, and have the students actually feel that fact that there needs to be very little movement. There's going to be a little bit of movement, but when you watch primarily inexperienced choirs or beginning choirs, I don't want to say beginning choirs, but choirs that haven't had the training, sometimes you'll see this pumping up and down with this, and that's a first indicator that there's something going wrong with the way we're breathing. Another monitor might be to say, take a pencil, put it in your belly button, and breathe so that you push the pencil out, and then to allow that abdominal wall to push back in as you release the breath, and to allow them to use all the breath. So not restarting, allowing them to get rid of the breath so that there's a new refreshed breath each time they do breathe, and a breath in time. Onset. I am a person who listens carefully, I think, to the way an ensemble starts the sound, because once it's out of our mouth, we can't fix it. It's just a basic premise that we need to make sure that it started with good breath, that there's not a stop. Sometimes there's a need for a glottal stop, but a glottal approach can be dangerous with younger singers, especially untrained singers. And let's be honest, most of us are not teaching trained singers. We are teaching students in either the high school, where they may not have a voice teacher, or middle school, or church choir, or community choir. And so we are their primary voice teachers. So we have to really spend a little time making sure that we're giving them foundational ideas. When they're standing, what's their posture like? And I hate that word posture, but what is that body doing? And are they feeling the 4 points, or the 4 areas of the foot on each side? Is it balanced? Are they standing on one foot? Are they leaning forward? How are we balanced? What are we doing to coordinate some of those things? And I think that's really a critical part of establishing a good process, and that can be part of that opening ideal of how do we warm the choir up? What are we doing? You could have them walking in place, you can have them breathing, you can have them just practicing some breathing exercises, and it can happen, of course, as you know, at any point in a rehearsal. Does not need to be at the beginning. If you hear something wrong, go back to some of the basics and come back and try and help those singers so that they re-engage the breath.
Absolutely. And thank you for expanding on breath and onset. Great areas that are important. Do you have any approaches specifically to vibrato and how you approach that?
It's interesting that you ask about that, because I would say that because my ear is attuned to intonation, and because I do a lot of 20th and 21st century music, that vibrato should be released, but should not go past that 5-6 cycles per second at a semitone would be a good way of talking about that. For me, Micah, that is to say that the music should determine how much and how little. And so the style of the music, the composition itself, should give us the insight. We had a great experience on Monday with Karen Parks, who's one of our Black voice teachers on the staff. And Karen was working with the chamber singers, and because we had just finished with a piece by Dale Trombore, we needed to really change the texture and the color of the voice. And she gave us some wonderful things out of her workshop with us, to just remind us that style matters, as does the vocal production as we do that. So she likes a little more tall vertical vowels. She asked for a little more vibrato, and the singers are able to do that. Now I'm working with the USC chamber singers. I'm not sure when I was working at Huntington Beach High School in the 1970s that I could do what I did with my ensemble, but I can maybe take that and ask for a different color. And I refer to color as being a way that we can create tone. We can create that by lips. We can create that by tongue. We can avoid tongue tension. We can do all of that, which will all affect the sound that we want. So does that expand enough for you?
Oh, yes, for sure. Well, before we go on to more questions, I want to take a brief moment here to share with our viewers an audio and video sample of this choral tone that Dr. Scheibe has been talking about. This is from the USC Chamber Singers performance at the 2015 ACDA, and I hope you enjoyed this video.
Amen.
As always, a beautiful performance from the USC Chamber Singers. And if you enjoyed that performance, there is a link to the entire video in the description of this video. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. So back to some questions here. Are there specific vocal exercises you incorporate to achieve this tone that we just heard?
Um, yes, I would say because it was in French, there was, there's language diction. So there were things that we had to use in our process to get that sound to go. And there's quite a wide variety of colors in the entire set of three. There's faster things and much more articulate, and then there's much more legato singing. So I think there's a balance there. So I tend, when I'm teaching language, liking to put that on a single pitch and chant sing it in rhythm. If that's one technique I may use, you may not think that that's affecting tone, but it is in a sense, because you're starting to get into the breath and into the mouth. You're starting to get the sense of the colors that we're working with in the French language. The same would be in German, for instance, if we're doing Brahms or Mendelssohn or Buchenberg. There's just a wonderful sense of how we use language to help with the tone and style. I'm a firm believer, Micah, in top-down vocalization. I am not, and that's because it's easier for me to think about mixing from top down into the voice, into the middle of the voice, and connecting it this way rather than pushing and allowing for the break not to be taught well. And that in a choir situation, you can't teach voice the same way you can in one-on-one. But what you can do is teach healthy technique. So depending on where they are in the range, one of the things I may do is I may ask them to sing into their hand as they go through a passaggio or go through there, making sure that the breath pressure is still even, that they feel the air coming out. So just by doing something like this, it can help manifest the way that they sing through that register if it's going from bottom to top. The other thing to remember is we don't want to bring that weight from the bottom up. We want to be careful of mixing. And so when you have a line that, let's say, goes like this, is to make sure that the weight on the bottom, especially if it's in the lower tessitura for a voice part, for a tenor on a D or a C, and for a soprano the same, and altos, when they get down there in the A, G, F sharp, that area, they're going to want to push that up. And we don't want that belt sound. So we have to ask them to be thinking about the direction going forward rather than up and down, so that I will ask my singers at times to actually use their hands and to guide the line as if it were on like a clothesline. I made that comment the other day, actually Wednesday in my rehearsal, and they kind of looked at me, and I know that clotheslines don't exist anymore. Everybody has a dryer. But for my Asian students, they did understand it because in their culture, it's very normal to still have a clothesline. But it's this idea that we sing the line thinking of it going forward in this direction rather than thinking up and down. And it's a way we can avoid the weight issue, which then will be problematic. The other thing that we have to do is we have to look in the actual language itself. Where are the N's, the NG's, the M's? Where can we use those more presently? So when we're singing O Magnum by any composer, but let's take Morten Lauritsen, you can use those M's and those N's to sing through so that pitch stays right in that marker, and that's a wonderful resonating feeling. They can feel it in the lips. They can feel it in the body. So I look at that. I look at fricatives. I look at plosives. I look at all of those things in the line, and I don't say it all to the choir. I don't say this is a fricative and this is a plosive. Watch it. I'm really trying to find the best way to manage the breath, to allow that to be free, to allow that singer to be healthy as they sing through this, and to allow them not to be fatigued by the end of the rehearsal. And since we have an hour and 50-minute rehearsals, that, along with an opera rehearsal, along with a conducting class, along with a recital choir, can be very taxing for a young singer. And young is still, before 30, basically. So I would say that it's something you have to think about. My warm-ups are, I will do things with lip burrs. I will use that because just to get the breath flowing. Of course, if there's this person with any type of tension or an issue, the easiest monitor is just to do this, and then you can, that will help them. But just to get them to feel that breath, and then to make sure that the breath isn't up in the shoulders, but it's managed in the abdominal area. We all know where it goes. It has to go to the bottom of the lungs, and they aren't there. And it's all the stuff about the diaphragm, which has nothing to do with anything, and realistically is not an important thing that we should be talking about. But really thinking about the depth of the breath. How far are we going down? And that's another reason for that refreshing of the breath.
Absolutely. So many great things that you discussed in there. And one thing I know you care a lot about is the consonants and how they fit in. I know we probably don't have time to go more into detail about that. Maybe that's another episode, another day. But you have many articles and book chapters about the importance of consonants. So I encourage our viewers to check those out. And then I also want to ask about, I know you're also a fan of the consonant S and the vowel A, say. And so can you explain maybe why you use that vowel and consonant?
I think we talk about things like lifted soft palate. We talk about an S being not important, and the say brings the tongue forward, brings the resonance forward, and I would say that that's a much more forward sound that I really would like to hear in general. So my mind is that say, 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 say. So if I use that, I'm starting the breath without a slap. When we do E, A, A, O, U, all of those are starting with a glottal stroke. Or they go E, A, O, you have the Y in there, which becomes a problem. So I'd rather have you go si, se, sa, so, su, and you can take those. That S actually is a pitched sound. You can start an S on the start of the pitch that you're going to sing, and I think we forget about that. We're worried about the vowel when the consonant is set up. The vowel is set up by the consonant preceding it. So, si, si, si. If we don't place that S in the right resonating area, si, we're in trouble. And we can use kinesthetics to help them with that. Si, si. So we're starting with breath, and then we're engaging that vowel that comes afterwards. And an M or a V or an F are all the same. Those are things we tend to ignore when we're thinking about starting a line or in the middle of a line, and we hear something that's out of tune and we can't figure out what it is. Oftentimes, it's going to be in the consonant.
Excellent. Another question here is, do you have any specific approaches during auditions and or the placement of singers in a standing arrangement that help you establish your preferred tone?
I want to caution people to say preferred tone. Let me caution you only because I think it's dangerous to take the singers in your room that are auditioning and say the tone I want it to be a flute choir, or I want it to be a reedy choir, or I want it to be sound like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and I'm going to take 20 singers, and realizing that we've got to be very careful. I think that I'm sometimes surprised by the differences from year to year, in the choral sound that I may have. Some years I'll have much more, I don't want to say mature because I hate that word. Um, Singers with a lot more experience, let's say that. So they have some basic concepts of vocal health and vocal singing. And so that will color the sound. Some years I'll have a soprano section that's freshmen and sophomores. That's going to be a different sound and mostly non majors. So with that, that sound's going to be different. And it is the selection of the singers for me that's critical. So how do we select them? I look at intonation and I look at tonal memory or pitch retention. And I look at sight reading as an important component as well. Uh, um, when I'm choosing my singers, the first step in the process is always to have them go through an audition where they're going to sing, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Micah. That will tell me a lot already about intonation. And I can move that around and I can kind of figure out where their voice type might be because they may think they're a soprano and they may be better served by being a second soprano or a first alto. Or sometimes an alto will want to sit on the low notes and they really need to be up higher for their own vocal health. So I think it's important for us to listen to them, to look at the sight reading skills. I think music literacy in a high functioning ensemble like the USC Chamber Singers is important, very important. But I do not think that music literacy only means sight reading. I think there's a much neglected part of musicianship, which is the ear. Because you can teach anybody to sing a solo in tune. You can teach anybody to sight read, but the tuning really requires the ear and their sense of pitch. And so that becomes a critical element in my scoring. So, we have, I think, 25 points on sight reading, and we have 8 points possible on tonal memory. And so the balance of the two of them gives me, if I say that 16 or 17 is the cutoff, it could be a person who's got okay sight reading ability, but has spectacular tonal memory, pitch retention. And that may at times play more into it when I get to the next step. And that next step, of course, is I give them a piece of music, I ask them to look at it, and then I listen to the singers and I try to mix an ensemble based upon the people that are in the room on the given day that I do the auditions, whether that's a tenor or soprano or alto or bass. And so that is something I picked up from my college director. His name was Frank Pooler, and he was a St. Olaf grad and actually a saxophonist at St. Olaf, and was very well known for contemporary music in particular and manuscripts, especially those from the Scandinavian countries. And so that part of it comes from him. That ability to mix. And then you can't forget Weston Noble and what he taught with his seating for vital colors. And I think that ear dominance, you want to listen for a singer who has where is the ear dominant, and that will also affect who you stand them next to and who you put on the outer sides of your ensemble. So you want a sight reader to be definitely on the ends, but also with those 7, 8 scores in pitch retention. And you want their ears outside and not inside to the ensemble so that they can hear and be part of that unification of the sound. And I want to talk about that term that a lot of people talk about, if I may, and that's blend, which I'm sorry, I hate to say this, Micah, but I think it's bland to do the blends thing. I do want that vibrancy in the sound. I don't want them to be overly too fast, too slow with vibrato. I don't want the vibrato to be too wide. But I can use those vibratos to warm the sound up a little bit, so that when I do something that requires, Brahms, when I want some Rheinberger, it does not need to be a straight tone. It can have some warmth to it. And when I do Ted Hearn, I may need absolutely much more attuned precision with the or Stephen Harkey, with the intonation and less vibrato in the sound. It's not to say that I'm asking for senza vibrato. I don't believe in that. I'll say that again. I don't believe in that, contrary to what others may think. I want my singers to feel free. And I think this year's ensemble, if I can just be so bold as to say that, there are so many colors in the choir that are absolutely incredible. And listening to all these colors that we can generate. And I remember Sonder Choi was in rehearsal on Wednesday, and he came in and he said, I can't believe the difference between this piece and this piece and this piece. You just came from a Gibbs tune that sounds like, oh my gosh, and then you come and we're doing a piece in Mandarin, June Jasmine, which by heart. And so we were talking about that. So I think the choir has the ability to give us all those different colors. We can't be afraid of asking for that sound, for the music. It's not for us, it's for the rep. And so our understanding of historical informed performance practice and what we need to do is critical in our own understanding of what we're going to ask our singers at the appropriate age to do in the rehearsal, and in the performance.
So many great insights. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with our viewers about tone? Anything that maybe has.
Well, I think my tone is informed by age and experience. Um, Having been around many conductors, I've been blessed to be in Southern California for a significant part of my growing up years until I was, 35. I was blessed by great voice faculty members at every institution I taught at, and as it is at USC. Um, and I would say that we're looking at a shift in what a paid professional singer needs to do. And I think that LA is a perfect example of that. That you can sing in the LA Opera, you can sing in the LA Master Chorale, you can sing early music, or you can sing in Kaleidoscope, or you can sing with this group or that group, and you can sing in the studio. When you go into the studio, they say it's musical theater. You switch and you move. And I think we forget how pliable the voice is, how much we can change it by just the formation of lips. If we want to change that, just at some point go take a look at Carreras and Domingo and Pavarotti. Watch what they do with small movements in the lips. It's an incredible reminder of how important this part is and how little we really want to have happen back here. And that's just a reminder. If you hear something, try to figure it out. And in my mind, vocal pedagogy, vocology, whatever term we want to call that, voice science has given us all sorts of new tools. And I'm continually learning that, and then also about the way the brain affects the way we rehearse and the way we teach.
I think you bring a great point here about continually learning and trying to further understand how all these things work and further develop our ideas of tone. Well, Dr. Scheibe, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. I know you are very busy, and even during this interview, I hear your email going off every 30 seconds or so, so I know how busy it is for you and all things are
Oh,
going on.
I'm so sorry. It is just, I can't turn, I haven't figured out, that Micah, if you're here, you could tell me exactly how to turn off the pings that are coming across. So I apologize for that
Oh, no
to
problem. But I think it's
my friends and colleagues. So
are great for our viewers to hear and understand how busy certain things are and how busy it can be. And to our viewers, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you continue to inspire the future leaders of our world through this wonderful gift we call music. Thanks.
thank you so much, Micah.